Okay, we'll get started. So, good afternoon and a warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. Details of the business to be considered today is shown on the agenda, copies of which are available in the room, and it's also accessible online under the live broadcast. For those present in the room and intending to speak, please note that you will be filmed and any statements you make will be recorded and made public. For those solely observing in the room today, you may wish to know that the camera is angled away from the public area where you're sitting. It's more sort of this direction, I guess. There isn't a sort of private part of the meeting today, so everyone is welcome to stay for the whole of the meeting. A reminder to anyone speaking today that your voice will only be audible online if the microphone is switched on, so do remember to try to switch it on, please. We're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm goes off, please follow officers to the fire exits and out of the building to the designated meeting points. In terms of mobile and tablet devices, for those in the room, please switch off any mobile devices before the meeting starts, or put them on silent. Please note that councillors on the committee may use their laptops or tablets during the meeting, as may management, during the meeting to view the agenda paperwork. If you are attending, there are residents' feedback forms. The information on these forms is intended to help us improve the way that we run our meetings. Forms can be completed and left in this room for collection after the meeting, or completed and returned by post to the address on the form. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also complete the form online, and there is a link below the broadcast. In terms of declarations of interest, which we'll cover shortly, please ensure that you identify which item you have an interest in, if there are any, state whether your interest is pecuniary or non-pecuniary, and give the reason that you have an interest. Members need not declare an interest in any item on the agenda where they have already listed this interest on the register of interest. There we go. I think that's just 4 mentions the word interest in that sentence. Furthermore, you do not need to declare an interest just because you are, for example, a ward councillor. We have no part 2 items, so we'll get started. Thank you to those attending and watching online. I think we need to go around the room, don't we, Anisha, with who's present. So apologies for absence. We haven't got any.
That's correct, Chairman.
And in terms of confirming who is here in the room today, I'm John Chesshire. I'm the independent chair of the Audit Committee.
Councillor Richard Lewis. I'm the Vice Chairman of the committee.
Councillor Nick Dennis.
Councillor Rita Chumdell.
Councillor Nasser Abbey.
Councillor Tony Bells.
Helen Thompson, partner from EY, the external auditors.
Larissa Midoni, audit manager from EY.
Stephanie Rayo, internal audit manager.
Alex Brown, head of counter fraud.
Claire Baker, head of internal audit.
Michael Bradley, outgoing interim head of internal audit.
Andy Evans, corporate director of finance.
James Lake, head of pensions, treasury and statutory accounts.
Thank you all very much. And Anisha Tedji, Democratic Services Officer, just gone to get some additional paperwork for us. She'll be back in just a minute. So let's get started. Part 1 of the agenda, we have item number 1, apologies for absence. We have no absences for this meeting. Agenda item 2, declarations of interest. No additional declarations of interest to note. And we'll move on. It's all part 1, so I don't have to worry about agenda item 3. And agenda item 4 is minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of November 2022, our last meeting. So, as usual, we'll just go through the minutes briefly, and if there are any suggested amendments or changes, we'll make note of those. Page 1. Page 2, 3, and that's it. So minutes taken as read. Perfect timing. Thank you very much. I kind of spun it out just perfectly there. The minutes are all fine. No declarations of interest. Thank you very much indeed. Yeah. Which brings us on to agenda item 5, the external audit update of the 2021-2022 statement of accounts. James, you're going to introduce this one for us.
Thank you, Chair. Yep, this paper introduces EY's update on the progress of the 21-22 accounts audit. Not wanting to steal any of EY's thunder, I could say the pension fund has been completed. I think we've sort of pretty much done on the pension fund now. And EY have been sort of going through review checks in terms of the information we've provided since the last meeting. So we're still having some ongoing questions and just clarifying some items there. I think we've got a way forward now on the infrastructure issue. That was a national issue. So again, we can move forward on there. And hopefully we're looking to have the audit completed by the end of February, perhaps early March. And with that, I wanted to sort of draw committee's attention to the recommendation. So rather than waiting until the April meeting, I'm asking committee to delegate authority to the Corporate Director of Finance in consultation with the Chair and the committee members to sign off the accounts before that meeting. So with that, I'll pass over to EY if I may, Chair.
Thank you very much, James. Good afternoon.
Afternoon. So apologies that you've just had the paper circulated rather than it being within the pack of papers. Combination of different timing of leave and trying to give you the most up-to-date position. But you'll be pleased to know that it's quite a short report as opposed to our monster reports that where 60-odd pages I think you'd struggle to digest in 2 minutes. That's one way of looking at it. So what we have done with this paper is to update the paper that we brought to the last meeting, which sets out where we are in terms of each of the risks identified. So I wasn't really going to cover the pension fund, it's more just on the council side. So in terms of where we are, we were obviously waiting for largely for a decision around infrastructure assets in particular, but there were other, being honest, there were other areas of the work that we were still working on, particularly around the valuation of land and buildings within property, plant and equipment. So things have moved on since our last meeting, and we have a memo from our valuation specialists on the work that we asked on the areas that we asked them to look at, and there's been a helpful discussion today between Larissa, James and the team around how we take that forward. In terms of floor areas, which was another area where there were some differences of opinion, I think, then that again we have a way forward on that now, which will allow us to go forward. And then the assessment of asset values not revalued. So we would expect all assets to be revalued over a rolling 5-year period, but we identified a number of assets which in total were above our planning materiality level that had not been revalued in year. There's 3 of those in particular that are of a high value, and we've had a chat about that this afternoon, and we think that's internally within our team. We think we have a couple of questions that we'll put to James and the rest other officers within the council, and if we get answers to that, that one will also resolve, we hope, in terms of issues. I think what we would say is that just in relation to the fixed asset register in general, then there are probably going to be a couple of control recommendations that we'll include in the audit results report around how we can make things a little bit easier going forward. So without wanting to kind of preempt what we might say in the full report, I think there will be a couple of issues there. In relation to infrastructure, we now have the statutory instrument which gives us the statutory overrides that DLUC have put in place. That became extant as expected on Christmas Day, so there was a lovely present for all auditors and accountants everywhere. We also had the SIPFA code update, so where SIPFA amended their code to allow the statutory override to work, and then subsequently, about 2 weeks ago, SIPFA issued a bulletin to local authorities to give some guidance, I think it's probably the right word, about how authorities might want to then interpret the code override and then take that forward. And within that, they also helpfully included some example disclosures that councils might wish to use. Since then, we have had our internal technical team has had a look at what that means and how we as auditors might need to deal with that. And we've had a couple of conversations today that I think mean we've got a way forward through that for the 21-22 accounts. So they are probably the key things that have changed since the last report. Larissa, unless there's one thing I've obviously forgotten.
Our internal specialist, EY Real Estates, submitted a draft of their report for our review, and they did identify certain areas of disagreement as professional judgment between our valuers and the council's valuers. Those areas are consistent to prior year. We did expect to see some differences. We tried to bridge the gap early in the audit process, and we managed to bridge it to some extent, but not completely, to eliminate that need of assessment of the difference on the whole portfolio. So we're currently undertaking the exercise to assess what the value would be impact on the portfolio, and you will see that result in the final report. Sorry, Chairman, just if I may, in terms of sort of where we go next, obviously what I'm very conscious of is that the suggestion of delegated authority is a really good one, but we would not do that without circulating the full audit results report to members of the committee, so that there is an opportunity for you to ask questions through email, or if completely necessary, an extraordinary meeting of some description if we needed to, because very conscious that you will not have seen and had the opportunity otherwise to look at what the findings are in proper detail, plus all the other pages of stuff that need to be included, that we need to report to you, so around independence. So it's all important, but obviously the focus is on the risks. So we will make sure that there is a proper process in place for all members of the committee to see that before the decision is made. I think that's fair, James, Andy, isn't it?
Lovely. Thank you very much for the update, for the report, and we'll come to the recommendation, I suppose, at the end. Any questions about the update or the progress, and the intention being for sign-off in February or March, depending when it completes? Please.
Just a question to James, probably, really, about it's obviously the pension fund accounts. Is there any knock-on with the delay in publishing the audited account for the pension fund?
The pension fund is part of the whole council's set of accounts, so it's not actually separate. It's produced separately, but it forms part of the whole statement of accounts, so that is linked together, so it's all part of one document. So yes, in effect, that the council's accounts haven't been signed off, nor has the pension fund accounts officially signed off. But we have produced the pension fund annual report, which includes the accounts, and published a draft of that as well, in accordance with regulations at the beginning of December. But so yes, there is a delay, but it's only because it forms part of the pension, the whole council's accounts.
Knock-on effect for us on that, is there? Because
no, there's no knock-on effect for the pension fund itself. No.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much, and obviously heartened to hear that progress has been made on a number of the sort of thorny issues associated with this, both locally and nationally. So I hope the next few weeks go as smoothly as they can, and that we get over the line with the least disruption to everyone as possible. Good news, and I'm pleased that we're nearly there. In terms of the recommendation and the way forward, I think it makes absolute sense to me to do what you're proposing, as long as we have suitable amount of time to review individually the results of the exercise, and then to put in place the mechanisms that you've recommended, James. So unless anyone is unhappy with that idea, then that's what we'll do. Thank you. Thank you very much again for the report, and thank you very much again for the hard work that I know you've all been putting into this across the teams. Thank you. Let's move on then to agenda item 6, Internal Audit Progress Report Q3 2022-23, and this includes the Q1 23-24 Internal Audit Plan. Michael.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as you say, this is a progress report and our proposed plan for Q1 of next year. During the Q3 period, the Internal Audit team have delivered 8 assurance reviews, completed to final. Another 5 assurance reviews are at draft report stage. Of those 8 finalised, 1 was a substantial assurance outcome, 6 were reasonable, and there was 1 which received a limited assurance opinion. That was the audit of the crematorium. Moving on to other internal in Q3, at Appendix C, Appendix B gives details of the additional work we undertook, and the audit plan for Q1 is appended as Appendix C. In terms of internal audit staffing and resourcing, which we report on in this report, as you know, the new permanent head of audit has been appointed to my left. The recruitment of new team members is now ongoing at a rate of knots, with hopefully appointing one by the end of this week. Probably worth mentioning about our additional resource, which we got from Mazars to help with the resource shortfall last year. It has taken some time to get Mazars up to scratch in terms of the quality and quantity of work that we'd expect from an internal function. That has slowed down some of the delivery of the audits we intended to deliver, but that's something that we are taking measures on. Additionally, a member of our staff who has been on long-term sick leave is now back in the fold and is undertaking now some follow-up audit work which we had paused as a result of that resource problem. Appendices as described. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Michael. And just before we get to questions, thank you very much, Michael, for all the hard work that you put in your time with us at Hillingdon. Thank you for steering the ship over the last few months. And a big welcome to you, Claire. It's no disrespect, but it's good to have a permanent head of audit in the role, and welcome to the committee. And thank you, Michael, for your service too. Colleagues, any questions on the internal audit papers here? One thing that I used to quite like reading, being an auditor, there was a sort of update in the papers usually about the internal audit KPIs. And obviously we have the fraud KPIs later in the pack. I'd welcome a return to the paperwork of the internal audit KPIs. I suppose there's a good opportunity to take a look at those again now, to consider what areas of performance might be worth looking at and reporting on. But at some point it'd be good to have those back in the papers too, of course. We have an external quality assessment underway of the audit service. That is quite an important exercise, and in many ways I suppose that'll feed into your thinking, Claire, about ideas for taking forward for the audit side of the house. When are we expecting the sort of draft report on that?
As I understand it, the external assessment will be done by the end of February, and potentially be able to report it back to the next committee at the end of April. I think they'll feed back initially to yourself and Andy, and then a paper will be produced to give the outcome to the committee.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Councillor Lewis.
My apologies. In 3.1.2 you talk about no or limited assurance options, and that one assurance review didn't pass.
That's right. So the one that received the limited assurance review was the crematorium audit. which had one high priority recommendation and two medium. So the crematorium audit had one high priority, two medium priority recommendations around their debt processing arrangements, separation of duties, and other lesser control issues. We've had a response from management, and we'll follow that up accordingly.
One other question was, in 5.3 it talks about the tri-borough internal audit team. Can you explain what that is, because I don't know what it is?
So the external quality assessment regime is undertaken by peer authorities. The tri-borough is Kensington, Chelsea, Westminster and Hammersmith and Fulham. So it's their head of audit for all three boroughs, assisted by one of their senior auditors, is undertaking that review of our arrangements independently against a public sector internal audit standard.
Thank you very much. On page, sorry, forgive me, the first page of Appendix A, actually, there's a long-standing audit that still has not been finalised. The second one down, service tenancies and payroll rent payments. The draft was in October. It's now the end of January. Is there a good reason for the delay on that one from management, I guess?
I think there is. I think it's got quite a few recommendations, that report, and management are taking the strategy of trying to get things better before they provide the management responses. We'll probably go back and try and encourage them to give us a management response, which includes what they're going to do, rather than wait for them to have things done. So it's not that they're ignoring it, things are happening, but we will continue to encourage them to give us those responses.
Thank you very much. I'll look forward to seeing that one finalised in due course. If we could scroll forward to sort of Appendix B, I had a couple of little questions about that. The capital programmes audit. From memory, this one is taking quite a long time to get over the line. And I think the domestic violence and homelessness process is another one that is probably later than I guess we would have hoped. Once again, are there good reasons for that? Reasons that you're comfortable with trying to get the work finished?
I think on the capital programmes one, I think Stephanie can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a draft report. It's been issued in the last week. The domestic violence and homeless process, it was delivered to us as a draft report. We have taken some quality assurance sort of steps backward to get it to a standard that we need to be able to put forward to management, basically. So it's not a management issue, it's a quality at this point.
And I guess that's from our partner,
correct,
primarily. Okay. My final question, you'll be pleased to know on that. Are we in a similar sort of situation with the information security report? The draft report was issued in August.
Yeah.
That's the record, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's in a similar situation. We've had a meeting with our external provider, and it's with them at the moment to agree that with management. So the draft report's out, and they're in discussion around that.
Okay, thank you very much. Hopefully, by the time we meet up next time, we'll have a number of those put to bed. Any comments or observations about the forthcoming plan for quarter one? I mean, there's a lot of audits in there from the place part of the authority. Was this sort of things that they wanted auditing, or things that we feel need auditing?
So it's things that are based on the highest risk areas. So it's things that they want auditing. We don't want to, push ourselves onto anybody, but it's things that also need auditing. So it's the priority risk areas.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or observations, colleagues? Okay. Thank you very much indeed, and thank you again, Michael. It's been a pleasure working with you. And looking forward to seeing you much more, Claire. Thank you. Let's move on then. Agenda item 7 is the SIPFA position statement on audit committees. Michael.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is reflecting on SIFA's recent position statement entitled Audit Committees in Local Authorities in Place 2022, where they've set out what they believe to be the purpose, model, core functions and membership of what a highly effective audit committee should be. So we've had a review of that, looked at where we comply and perhaps where we don't. Largely in compliance, there's two issues which I've highlighted in this short report where the committee may want to consider what we do. One is whether that's page 5, whether the Chief Executive attends. So we've contacted the Chief Executive and he'd be happy to attend in the future via Mr Evans. And the second one is whether we have at least 2 co-opted independent members to provide appropriate technical expertise, as they put it.
Did you approach anyone about that to see whether they like the idea?
I haven't done that, no.
Okay.
I think the committee would need to say, well...
Good. All right. Firstly, I think it'd be wonderful if the Chief Executive attended from time to time, and the committee would welcome that. So thank you very much for progressing that action. In terms of the other action or other questions about the other action, forgive me. Councillor Dennis.
Yes, I've been told that this was sort of mooted maybe a year or so, or before I was on the committee anyway, and obviously it hasn't happened. I just wondered if we know why it hadn't happened. Was a decision made, or was an official response made, or was it one of those things that just sort of fell by the way because we were busy with other things?
I don't think it wasn't a deliberate strategy to avoid the recommendations. I think it was just a passing of time and getting round to it. As I say, once I was made aware of it, had a conversation with the Chief Exec, who said he'd be very keen to attend from time to time, and must admit he would have been here tonight had he not been pre-planned annual leave. So.
It was the other one, I think, Andy, the idea of the independent.
Yeah, sorry, it was the independent one rather than the Chief Exec attending. So.
Yeah, no, I think that's something we'll give some consideration to, but it's getting the right person and the right skill set in the room, with those people being quite thin on the ground at the moment. So, but we'll take your views and feedback on that.
Colleagues, any views on whether seeking to obtain the services of another independent feels like a good idea to you or not? Councillor Chandler.
Yes, what would be the benefits of having an extra independent person, or what would be the benefits of us staying as we are?
I think Suffolk's point is that you can perhaps get specific expertise and specialisms from a co-opted member from a particular sector or a particular professionalism, which might be able to plug if there are any gaps in the committee's knowledge or expertise, and it gives that completely independent and objective view of the papers that come, as opposed to perhaps members.
And I see that as a big potential benefit. I think we lack a little bit in terms of accountancy expertise on the committee. I'm certainly not a qualified accountant, and some of the issues that we have to consider obviously are complex, involve huge sums of money, and I feel that a little bit more expertise in that area could only help us deliver our role more effectively. So I think the skills bit, particularly in that area, is something that I feel that we could look to up our game in, and that would be maybe a driver for me to say, I think it's a good idea. And I suppose the second other point that crossed my mind was that there is a time limit on how long me, as the current independent chair, serve on the committee, if I make it to that cut-off point. And so this would help potentially with succession as well in due course, if we decide to have another independent chair in the future. So I think there's a couple of good reasons why this potential action is something that I would support in being considered, whether that's through Andy or Democratic Services. I'm not quite sure of the next steps. But if we as a committee thought it was a good idea to at least seek to pursue, then I'd be voting for that. I think if we could maybe take a look at next steps. Andy?
Yeah, I'd be happy to take as an action to investigate how that might work. As a first step, maybe speak to some of my counterparts, colleagues across London to see how they've addressed this sort of request. Being mindful of your sort of suggestion that some accountancy expertise might complement the skills you have in the audit function as a sort of first step, but I'll take that away if that's okay with yourself.
Lovely, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for doing the review and for coming up with these two ideas for improvement. Thank you, Michael. Let's move on then. So we have agenda item 8, 2022-23 Q2 Q3 corporate risk register. Stephanie.
Thank you, Chair. So this presentation refers to Part 1, Agenda Item 8, Papers 31 to 49. This is the Corporate Risk Register for Quarters 2 and Quarter 3. So it's a cumulative update and it's for the period of July to December 2022. So this report provides evidence to the committee about how corporate risks are being identified, managed and the mitigating actions in place. Page 33 contains a summary of the corporate risks, and a copy of this paper containing the risk direction of all travel of all risks. Further, you'll find pages 35 to 47 contains the detail behind the risk in each risk register. You'll find the key movements in the corporate risk register since quarter 1 are as follows. So risk 2, meeting housing needs. The risk rating has deteriorated from B1 to A, apologies, there's a typo here, to A1, and it's due to the significant increase in demand, homelessness applications and associated need to provide emergency accommodation. It's also linked to other contributing factors such as move on accommodation in the private rec centre, and that's linked to the unaffordable rents for different households, and has been updated to reflect the increase in asylum places in Hillingdon, which includes Home Office hotel use, Afghan resettlement and Ukrainian households. Risk 4 is litigation claims, and this is the risk of litigation claims against the council that are handled by our insurers. You'll note that this risk has been retired. It has been de-escalated to the Finance Directorate Risk Register, and therefore the risk rating is reduced from B3 to D3, and this is due to the projected reserve of litigated claims expected to materialise in the medium term. So this is continuously tracked and monitored, and it's remained pretty static for that period of time. Risk 7 is school places, the risk of not meeting demands for school places. So the title of this risk has been changed just to school places to reflect the statutory duty and the risk of that particular sufficiency. The risk rating has changed from D2 to C1 due to the demand for places for the complex SEN cohort. Then we have risk 8, which is the general data protection regulations. The loss of mishandling of any personal data. It's just to note the Cabinet lead has changed from Councillor Edwards to Councillor Mills. And risk 11 is the coronavirus risk entry. So it's just to note that following on from the discussion at last audit committee, the risk cause and consequence has been updated to reflect the evolving risks to residents. It's been refreshed. The identification and spread of a variant of the virus which the COVID vaccination affords no or limited immunological protection creates a risk to human health for residents. So it's just stating that the risk is at a national level meets the threshold for central government intervention and results in impact in the borough comparable to pre-vaccination pandemic time periods. So it's more looking into the post lockdown and moving forward and keeping it a current activity. The last page you'll note obviously is the risk scoring methodology. And all risks have been reviewed and updated in accordance with the risk rating, risk methodology. However, you may note that some risk ratings and direction of travel have remained static. This is a historic report as at the 31st of December. It was just a brief summary, so happy to answer any questions that you have about this report.
Thank you very much indeed for the update and for the paper. Any observations or questions, colleagues? Councillor Bowles.
Yeah, thank you. I certainly agree that the housing issue, I think all councillors will say our postbags are bulging with housing issues, and it's a bit of a worry to see. You know, it's good that it's been identified as a very high risk, but I don't know where we go from here. Really, be interesting to know.
I've got a sort of similar question or observation in a way, if I can just cut in there as well. At what point does this move from being a risk to the reality, and does that trigger any additional action by colleagues? If we're saying it's now not something that might happen, it really is happening, an incident rather than a risk.
I suppose that could be said for the coronavirus risk entry as well. It actually did materialise, and like other risk entries, not obviously as high risk score as that, but others in the corporate risk register have materialised. For example, like the HS2 that was then moved down to the directorate. In terms of actions that are undertaken, it's relative to the risk that it poses, and obviously, even prior to it going to an A1, there was action that was being undertaken, robust action, and there's obviously collaborative work that's been undertaken with services such as Andy's in finance, and we've updated the actions as at the 31st of December, and this was a topic at our corporate risk management group meeting where it's under close scrutiny, and I know there's actually a lot of sub-risks that are on the place directorate risk register that contribute to this. So there's a lot of work underway, and there's the governance structure in place to actually report and escalate any issues and emerging risks, and actually when they do materialise. So there is that governance structure in place to accommodate such issues. Did that answer the question?
It's certainly not an easy question to answer. So, and it wasn't meant to sort of be any form of trick or anything. But I suppose as a committee, you know, we're clearly reassured that strands of action and activity are well underway, that it's a subject that's being discussed and, you know, options batted around. It's just like many of these, it's a very difficult problem to address at our level.
It actually aligns to the comment that you made about the audit plan in place. So you'll see that obviously we've targeted the high risk areas, and obviously there's things that they're fully aware of, but there's also things that we could perhaps assist with. So it's where we've targeted our efforts.
Please, the committee, I know, are pleased to see the focus and attention on that, and can only hope that the audit work will also generate opportunities, ideas for improvement here too. Councillor Lewis.
Yeah, the security services are quite concerned at the moment about an increase in cyber attacks coming out of Russia. I think it should be moved up the register, up the risk register, to be honest.
And the discussions have been had on a quarterly basis, and obviously they have their own controls in place, and I think it would be very timely to review, as we would do anyway in the next quarter, but we hopefully would have the outcome of our IT security audit as well. So I think that would actually be good to dovetail with any potential results of that. But there are checks and controls in place in terms of phishing and cyber attacks that are already embedded and in place, and with the programme obviously where over the last couple of years we've moved to the cloud, it's more on, as in the risk entry, there's ongoing controls that are kind of in place and checked regularly, and patching and things like that. So I suppose it'd be any possible tweaks to what we have in place already that could actually help, if possible, that would potentially come out of the audit findings, but we wouldn't know that until we finalise the audit report.
Councillor Lewis.
If I could just follow up, I mean, we seem to be quite open with our Wi-Fi, and we don't have. I don't think we go through tunnel VPNs or anything like that. I'd be interested to know when we last employed a white hat hacker to try and hack into the service.
What I could do is I could take down your specific queries, and then I could take them back to and report it at the next audit committee, and hopefully it might actually see some of the updates embedded in the risk entry as well. So sorry, could I just confirm it's the two queries that you'd like to raise?
Well, you're absolutely right. The modern way is to go to cloud servers to eliminate servers, physical servers. But there's a general movement towards tunneled VPNs.
Okay.
Our Wi-Fi is particularly easy to I don't know how easy it is to hack across into the central services, but the main query is, have we ever had our systems tested? You can actually employ white hat hackers to attack the system on our behalf. So.
Okay, yes, thank you. I'll get back to you on that one.
My understanding is that has been done previously, but I don't know whether it's a rolling programme that is carried out on a kind of, say, annual basis. So an update would be reassuring, I hope. Thank you.
Sorry, can I just add, there is a lot of free advice out there from the National Cyber Resilience Service, which is funded, one of the few things you actually get out of the Mayor of London's office, and the police services actually fund it. So you can get that free. So.
Councillor Abbey.
Thank you, Chair. With reference to page 41, risk number 7, quite concerned about the SEND. The direction of travel says it's actually going down, and there's a risk element that. Would you mind elaborating a bit more? What can be done by that part? Thank you.
I think it's more complex than that. It's obviously you look at the sufficiency of school places based on the annual SCAP return, which is forecast. Obviously, as students go through the school age, then go through to the secondary school ages, and the demographic changes. In terms of the increase in the complex SEN cohort, I think that will mostly be managed with the work that's been undertaken in the DSG, which is another risk entry lower down in the corporate risk register. There's various different work streams that are underway, and in terms of the programme, they're monitored granularly, and obviously they have their targets that they need to meet. Andy, did you want to go into further detail on that one?
Yeah, I mean, I can just start. I mean, I think the direction of travel on the risk is just recognising the complexity and challenge in this area, rather than anything specific. There are a number of plans and work streams in progress to address the challenges in this area, which date back to the Children and Families Act being implemented in 2014. And as you know, the authority has in place a safety valve, which gives us some extra funding towards resolving some of the challenges in that area. But I think the economic conditions have exacerbated some of the challenges around delivery of the capital programmes in those extra places. So really the risk entry is just recognising some of those additional challenges in light of those more recent economic conditions and the deterioration in that, rather than a problem specifically around delivery of places. That helps.
Councillor Abbey.
Thank you very much. Just to add to the point Councillor Lewis have raised, I know there's big companies that use hackers, quite like financial companies, Remit and all the rest of them, and they're quite useful actually to see the point I raised. Thank you very much. But thanks for it, Stephanie and Andy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or observations? Thank you very much for the update, and thank you very much for the report, Stephanie. Let's turn to agenda item 9, the 22-23 Q3 counter fraud, progress report. Alex.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to take the committee through the counter fraud Q3 progress report, which starts on pages 53 of your packs. The team has achieved £3.75 million in savings across Q3 across multiple service areas, bringing the year-to-date figure to £10.7 million. A little bit of context for the committee behind that. In housing, we've recovered a further 25 properties, bringing the year-to-date total to 62, and I've looked back on historic audit committee papers, and I believe it's the highest that's ever been achieved here at Hillingdon. Going back to Steph's presentation, talking about meeting housing needs and the risks that are presented there, it obviously also presents a higher risk of fraud, with the numbers obviously approaching us. So we've undertaken some proactive bed and breakfast accommodation work, basically checking out the emergency accommodation to make sure everyone is resident and living there. At the time of writing this report, we've closed 6 bed and breakfasts down for non-occupation, and we have a further 11 cases that are open for investigation. Overall, tenancy fraud is still tracking as our biggest risk post-COVID. We still have 129 live investigations. We don't see that slowing down, and we expect that to continue into the future. In revenues, we're still working with our suppliers to maximise revenue across business rates. So they're identifying businesses that aren't listed for rates or they're currently undervalued. And we've issued another set of bills valued of £1.8 million, so bringing the year-to-date to £5.9 million. In social care, we've got 5 ongoing, quite complex investigations around direct payments and special guardianship orders, and that is at a value of £225,000. Looking forward to looking into Q4, the National Fraud Initiative's biannual matches are about to be released, so there's a lot of data matching to be done by the team and other service areas, basically to identify fraud, loss and error. And we're starting to look forward to the future. So we're starting to plan for the upcoming year, update the fraud risk assessment, look at the annual operational work plan for the committee for next year, which will also inform what the operating model and the structure will look like for 23-24. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Alex. And did you say look forward to the future? I thought you might have done. I'm sure it's just a slip of the tongue. Anyway, maybe my hearing. Any questions or observations from the committee for Alex? Councillor Dennis, thank you.
Just out of curiosity, I mean, what do you put down to sort of the even greater success of picking up houses that we need? Because obviously, as we discussed in previous items, that is such an important thing for us.
I think, yeah, that's a really good question. It's quite difficult to answer. I think a lot of what we want to achieve moving into next year is sustaining performance, so trying to sustain high levels of property recovery when we know the cases are there. There are other things we're looking into. We've got quite a challenging transformation plan to actually look into other areas, which also includes like looking at other things like unlawful profit orders, and there's some other sort of options available to us like sanctions that we can deal with tenancy fraud. So yeah, it's quite challenging when within revenues, obviously revenues maximisation, the money that's been achieved, and also with tenancy fraud. I think it's more about sustaining that moving forward.
Thank you very much indeed, and you set a high bar to sustain in the future, I'm sure. Any other questions or observations about any of the content there? I mean, obviously, some terrific figures once again. Well done to you and to the team on the sustained level of work that you've put in here. Obviously, personally, a little bit disappointed that the Q3 total was less than Q2, but, you know, you set a too high a benchmark last time. I am only joking. A tremendous result. Very well done indeed. Any other questions? Councillor Chandler, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to echo your comments. That was an impressive set of figures. You've set yourself a high bar for the coming year, but I think we have full confidence that you'll deliver.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I've got one or two little observations, if I may. On page 57, para 3.1.8, I was just thinking about this and the housing tenancy verification work. And it's probably my lack of understanding here. But why are the fraud team doing that and not the housing team doing that, having been trained by you to do it well, perhaps?
So originally this was a housing function. It came to counter fraud in 2016, I believe. We revamped the process to make it more efficient, more aligned to the fraud risks that are presented within social housing. I understand where you come from. It's more of an assurance piece and verifying if people are genuinely allowed to obviously gain a council property. What I would say is, I suppose it's more around the risk of this. We're actually verifying people at the point of when they're about to be offered a property. So without this work, we would be giving away properties that people aren't obviously eligible for.
Okay, thank you for that. I suppose it's one of those functions that probably could sit in one or two different areas, but I mean, it seems to be successfully sat here, and I guess it's not preventing you from doing lots of other fraud work, counter fraud work, clearly, as we can see. I don't have any additional questions other than lots of ticks and goods marked in all of the paperwork that I've put down here. So, thank you for that, Councillor Abbey.
Good report. Thank you very much. Just a quick question. On Q3, on page 57, 3.1.8, the CFT has completed 291 verifications, and you said you've got 60 housing register applications that should have been rejected or should be rejected in a variety of reasons. Are these ex-council properties or people trying to buy the properties, or is it just...
So these are people that are on our waiting list that are approaching for social housing. So as they come up to view, we've rejected them because they may not meet the criteria set out in the council's allocation policy. It could be a variety of reasons. It could be anything from that we find out that actually they don't meet the eligibility criteria, all the way through to that they've got antisocial behaviour issues, rent arrears, and they wouldn't be a good tenant for the council and wouldn't meet the criteria to pass verification.
Thank you. So for ex-council properties or people that live in council properties that are trying to buy the properties from the council, does your department get involved in verifying if they're actually genuine or...?
Yep, so every single right to buy of the council properties come through the counter fraud team. We do a robust verification check, which includes residency checks, to make sure there isn't any risks surrounding tenancy fraud or the monies, obviously, we're receiving for the properties.
Mr. Abbey.
Thank you very much. Any data on that one? Have we managed to sort of capture any?
Yep, it is in the report. It is in 3.1.6.
No further questions. Thank you very much.
Councillor Burles.
Yeah, thank you. Great report, and well done on all the hard work. Just one of the old favourites, beds in sheds. I noticed you've got eight in quarter 3. You must have loads of people ringing in saying there's beds in sheds, because I obviously get quite a few. But yeah, it's
certainly an area of risk. I think we've closed to date. We've identified 44 in year to date. So the revenues team within counter fraud actually go out and proactively look for any issues with beds and sheds, and we bring them in for council tax.
Thank you very much. And before we move to the final agenda item, just to say, thank you again to everyone involved on the audit side, external audit, finance team, and the counter fraud team for all the excellent work that you've been carrying out over this winter period. So thank you from the committee. Keep up the good work, I think, is the message I'm getting from my colleagues here. Last but not least, then, agenda item 10, the Audit Committee Forward Programme. Anisha.
Thank you, Chairman. The work programme details upcoming meetings and also the reports due for the next meeting. A fuller work programme will be provided at the next meeting with the reports coming for 2023-24. Thank you, Chairman.
And that concludes this evening's meeting. Thank you all for the reports, for answering our questions. Thank you, colleagues. And I hope the next couple of months till we meet again goes smoothly and successfully, particularly in terms of the accounts. Thank you very much indeed. Good evening.